Hello and a very warm welcome to VCC TV. I am Shrija Agrawal and this is a special episode we are doing ahead of budget. With me today are four very interesting startups and we are going to talk about expectations that they have from the Finance Minister. So let's hear it from Samik.
My name is Samik Sarkar and I come from the interesting startup called as Zakopi. And Zakopi is an Apple Store discovery platform. We are basically trying to develop a community of fashionistas presently in 3 cities, Bombay, Delhi and Calcutta, 10,000 odd stores.
Okay.
And we are funded by Unicorn Ventures, which is primarily O3 Capital.
Hi, my name is Danish. I'm the CEO co-founder at Shopsity. Shopsity is an app through which customers can see what products are selling in stores near them and go to the store and pick up the products. Prior to this, I was the co-founder at ab.com. We are seed funded. We raised capital from ShopClues founders and NetPrice founders, already profitable. So that's what we're doing.
Okay, and we also have a female entrepreneur with us. Yes, Sakshi.
Hi, so I'm Sakshi Vich. I am the founder and CEO of Miles. We are funded by Cars on Rent, which is the largest car rental mobility solutions provider in India. Miles is a platform that connects car users with car owners. The idea is to create a more cohesive ecosystem and an alternate method of car ownership, because we believe that there is just too much rush and too much traffic in the cities, and there is a way to have lesser cars in the city and yet be equally mobile.
Interesting. Okay, and now with Shailesh. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Shailesh. I am from Joy by Nature. Joy by Nature is India's largest nature-led well-being platform. What we do is we provide information about nature-led well-being and also products that support nature-led well-being. We were funded by Mumbai Angels, Contrarian Drishti Fund and a couple of other individuals.
Let me begin with you, Danish. You have been a co-founder of Yebi, which has been pretty much a large entrenched company in the e-commerce space, went through a bit of a tough time, and now you are starting off your own. Tell me one thing, how does GST, which is a very critical part in the entire budget thing, will play in your logistics in your e-commerce sector? And what is the expectation, particularly in this regard, from the FM?
See, I think GST is very critical, more than e-commerce, to the whole wholesale industry, which is waiting for disruption with the GST coming on board. I think more than the opportunity in e-commerce, there's a larger opportunity in B2B commerce, which GST will open up, from distributors able to sell products directly to retailers. And even in e-commerce, the whole, there's a lot of paperwork required to sell products from one point to the other. Different states have different rules, which creates a lot of complexity in businesses. For large businesses, they have opportunities to open offices everywhere and solve that problem. But for startups, that's a problem to be solved. And GST will solve a lot of these problems. It will drastically change the way India, trades and retails.
So what exactly are you looking at? Uniform GST?
Uniform GST, easy rules of transfer between states. I think these are two critical aspects that I'll be looking at.
Shailesh, what about you? What are your 3 top expectations from the FM?
So one of the things is that we want to promote nature-led well-being among people. So one of the key things that can happen is that there is some focus, some emphasis, some ESOP to be provided for the natural products or organic products, which leads to the betterment of not just the people who live in the country, but also the ecological balance in the country. So as we look in the mid to long term, right? I mean, giving SOPs to this particular space, this particular field, will not just be beneficial for our population at large, but also for the environment that we live in. So that is
you basically want tax SOPs for nature products.
Absolutely. I mean, any kind of promotion that helps expand the market, helps promote the use of these products will absolutely be useful both for the country as well as for its population.
I think this is the first we have heard, tax SOPs for natural products, really.
Actually, if you look at it, I mean, in the economic times today, if you see, I mean, there are companies like Patanjali and quite a few others who are pushing the envelope in this space. I mean, what has happened is historically, I mean, India, while it has been at the forefront of natural and organic revolution, it has never seen the limelight. But guys like Patanjali and all are now sort of hitting the frontier by giving stiff competition to MNCs. MNCs have advertised very heavily in this space, but I guess it's about time for India to push out its treasure trove, to sort of put it out in front of not just people in the country but also globally, so that there is some ecological balance in the entire world, as well as better health for people who live across the world.
Interesting. Sakshi, what about you? What is your view here?
So, I completely agree. I think on both ends that there is a lot that needs to be done in terms of promoting, on the one end the local logistics and really giving benefit there, and the other end local products and really enabling local brands to be able to promote. For Miles as such, because we are a product that's trying to create an ecosystem where you don't need to own cars and yet you can be mobile, and there can be a much easier way for people to have a car accessible. Therefore, I think a couple of things that are very critical is better development of infrastructure when it comes to support to car sharing services like us. I think globally there are a lot of benefits that are given to car sharing services. Parkings are dedicated.
Can you be specific about those benefits which the government can emulate
So
here?
one of the things that happens is a lot of cities in Europe as well as the US have something called a congestion tax, which enables people to reduce, which enables cities to reduce the congestion on specific routes in the city. That enables people to own cars for specific periods of time, and that also therefore reduces the number of cars which are added progressively in every city, which has actually helped in people shifting to the idea of car sharing more than buying cars all the time.
So you basically want this to sort of help your business?
Oh, not just my business actually. I think it's very interesting on the long-term impacts of car sharing. And that's
congestion tax in India, okay.
Congestion tax is important. I think Mumbai is thinking about it. They've recently submitted something. The BMC is thinking about it. Bombay suffers from a huge problem. We're still, sitting in Delhi, we're still, trying to understand what's the real solution to the congestion and pollution. In addition to that, I think, and my belief is that GST can help this as well. I believe that a lot of road taxes, state border taxes are paid by consumers while they are traveling, while they are crossing borders. If that can be made online, it will become far more convenient for people to be mobile within states. And a lot of effort therefore needs to be made on that step as well. That end as well. So yeah, I think those are the two things that are really important.
So what about you, Shamik? I think let's hear from you.
I think more from a startup ecosystem perspective, few things which I would like in the budget is, about this entire thing of the angel tax, right? I believe that should be, kept away with. Done away with, because these are the guys who are actually driving the ecosystem. That is, the most amount of risk in that category of investment. So I think that should be done away with. I think a lot has to be done in the development of startup ecosystem. When I say startup ecosystem, how about creating some good amount of incubators and accelerators? The government should focus on those things, because in the US, there is.
But don't we have enough out there anyways?
But you won't see a lot of successful startups right now in India compared to the US coming out of accelerators. So if you
want
have
a government-sponsored accelerator, you're
exactly,
looking at.
right. Then probably what will also help is the winding of policies. The bankruptcy law is presently too complicated. Here we are, in this 2016, like every day, few startups are coming up.
And they're shutting down too.
They are shutting down too, and that is how it is. And as a country, we have to agree to that. So that process has to be liberalized a bit, so that we move on and do better things in life.
I think in our country, definitely bankruptcy seems a big taboo. Something did not work out. I think in the US, people are sort of more open about it. Having said that, I think it's a good point that you sort of mentioned about startup ecosystem. We just had this entire Startup India program recently. Prime Minister announced this entire 10,000 crore fund of funds program. It was a huge headline-grabbing announcement, but do you guys envisage anything happening in ground reality in the budget there, and what exactly is expectation on that front? Yeah, Shailesh, want to sort of say something on that, Gravan?
So, see, I think purely from as you said, from an announcement and a headline-grabbing perspective, it's a superb announcement. It's a great, so to say, inspiration, and for people like us, because people like us, when we are trying to sort of push the envelope, we do need the resources. We're trying to create markets. We're trying to introduce new services and change the way people live their lives day to day, right? So from that perspective, having government sponsoring such projects is a phenomenal thing. How much of that actually trickles down obviously is a strong function of the real intent of the government. Based on what they've been doing, I mean, we feel confident that yes, it will come through, and it will work as a strong inspiration for people who are planning to be entrepreneurs. Because let's say that see, typically what happens is government looks at projects in one way, and the VCs and institutional investors look at projects in a different way.
Absolutely.
For them, the returns and various other factors are more important, whereas for government, the overall development of the country and other factors are more important. So I guess if government is not just able to provide funds, but also able to select projects based on what can be really good for the country, for its people, for its environment, I guess that 10,000 would be a superb, so to say, inspiration and a drive for people who are trying to create something in this space.
Interesting. Talking about taxes in detail, I think you raised this point of angel tax to be completely done away with. You talked about congestion tax to be implemented in a few cities. What about capital gains tax? Aren't your investors sort of really pressing you guys, dude, you have to make money, you have to pay capital gains also on that? So I think it's tough to raise money. It's a difficult fundraising environment, and 2016 is going to be tough on various fronts. So what is the communication with investors in that regard on capital gains? Maybe I can begin with you.
So I think capital gains is a important topic for investors. A lot of our larger companies, even Flipkart, my company itself, are based out of Singapore because of the tax laws there, and so that's what investors typically prefer. If you could do that in India and do away with capital gains tax as a whole, especially for this industry, that would be great for investors.
I'm not sure if we can do away with capital gains.
But you can do it in Singapore. You don't have capital gains tax.
Yeah, but that is like, I mean, we as a country also sort of need to make money.
You could do it only for startups. So startups have been defined by the government yesterday in the Gazette that came out. And once you have defined a startup, you could do away with capital tax on those startups, maybe for a limited period of time, maybe say 10 years. That will be hugely beneficial. See, a lot of companies don't. Another thing besides capital tax is the whole IPO laws. In India, it's a little difficult to do IPOs given that the profitabilities are concerned. A lot of companies do IPO in the US. Make My Trip, InfoEdge,
they're all going outside India to
already listed outside. And Flipkart recently said that they would love to list in India, but they're not sure if that is capital.
Interesting. So you guys think that in terms of more flexibility on IPO laws, you think that as a nation we are sort of very fixated on companies being profitable? Before the IPO, you think that mindset has to change? So if given a choice, you guys will list in India and not go outside, right? Absolutely. Hypothetically, I mean, you guys are still very young and sort of just at the beginning stage.
It makes a lot of sense. See, you have customer demand coming from India. You're earning money from India.
You're a brand in India. You're a domestic brand.
And therefore, your ability to, so if you go outside, go to the US and stuff, you have to sell your story all over again. Yeah. People here are using your product, they know your story. So if Flipkart, lists in India, I know what Flipkart is about. They don't need to sell that story to me. So the whole consumers will start, listing out for shares. If you go abroad and you start listing your products there, then you have to, reach out to financial institutions to bet on you. And that's not that great an IPO.
I think one of the things that's really important is a more inclusive decision making as far as any of these startup ideas are concerned. Whether the fund has to be used for specific areas, whether we want that. What should be the changes in the IPO laws for startups or whatever. I think the decision making should start becoming more inclusive instead of just the bureaucracy sitting and deciding what needs to be.
You guys, startups' voice also to be heard in a very.
I think that's becoming a growing concern because startups in India are a very new, and I call it an industry because I think we're all one set on our own. And therefore, the more we start seeing, an inclusiveness in the decision making in the center and the states, the better it becomes. In the mobility space in particular, we've seen some steps there. We've seen that the state boards, for example, want to know what should they do. So the reason I say congestion taxes or better infrastructure for car sharing is because these are ideas that we've sort of pushed in the ministries as well. True. So I think that inclusiveness is very important across sectors.
Interesting.
And on wherever whatever decision needs to be made, something needs to be. I mean, the industry needs to be.
Yeah. Let's talk about starting up a startup. How can that become easier? In terms of incorporation of a company, in terms of paying taxes in the first 2 years. Let's sort of begin with you and then we can talk about the mid stage when you are 3 to 4 years old, and then about when you are 6-7 years old, thinking of an acquisition or enlisting. So let's go sort of step by step.
So I think when you begin, I think obviously company incorporation and those things take time, right? And we have a few guys straight out of college, and you want to do something. So rather they should focus more on developing the product rather than going through the formalities of creating.
So how can that become easier?
So,
What the government do about
so I think it should be a more of an online process, wherein, and the timeline should be very small. I mean, if you in today's world, the day you have a product, you probably need a seed funding within 3 to 4 months.
That's true.
And in that, if you spend 2.5 to 3 months incorporating a company, you are losing time.
True. Danish, you have any viewpoint there?
See, yeah, I think so. Incorporation of a company is not that much of a concern as far as I'm concerned, because by the time you figure out what you want to do, the company is set. I think taxes, I think, is a very important perspective. What the government has done away with is income tax, but most startups don't have income tax anyway. So there's hardly.
So you basically think that it's basically a wishy-washy kind of thing.
Yes, no, not that. So all credit to them. So some of the things that done are phenomenal. But I think service tax is an area that a lot of us are struggling with. You've got employees that have salaries and they have to be paid service.
So what do you want the service tax front?
I think service tax should be given, waived off for a couple of years at least. That's a huge relief actually. It's a significant cost for software, for salaries, for marketing, almost everything that we are doing.
Aren't we being a little too ambitious here? Service tax being waived off completely.
Ultimately, you create tremendous value for the government. Look at how much service tax would you anyway earn from a startup? A few lakh rupees, maybe 10, 20, 30, 40 lakh rupees. But if that startup is able to save that money and grow larger, then you are able to earn several crores from that startup. So it's a long-term vision. Right, so you forgive us service tax for a few years so that you can become big enough for me to give me more service tax, which makes a lot of sense for government. I think I think incubation centers is another, not accelerators as such maybe, where the government guides you.
So basically you want government to take a more active step in mentoring staff.
No, I tell you, no, not mentoring. Let us do that job. So I would be happy if the government.
What government is mentoring?
No, please don't mentor us. But what I would say is, places to rent, for startups.
Co-working spaces.
Correct. That's it. Nothing more than that.
That should be easy and doable, I guess.
Correct. So a lot of people have started giving co-working spaces, but it's a long-term investment. It takes long time to recover that investment, and there's risk involved, which is where the government can come in. They can take spaces and give it out to startups at zero rent or low rents, and help them. So we don't need the government to really sponsor us or to guide us or mentor us. But they just help us reduce our costs.
Tell you one thing, if given a choice, would you rather raise money from a government-sponsored fund or an angel or a VC?
No, what I would want is, see, the fund of fund, the way it works is that if I'm an angel fund or a VC,
they invest in your angel fund and a fund.
They will invest in the fund.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes, and the fund will take equity from you.
Yeah.
I would rather want it this way, that if you are able to raise $1 million, a bank can give you another $1 million as debt financing.
Okay.
Which helps you save equity, so that instead of the funds giving to the VC, the funds goes through equity to the company, but not as equity but debt.
That's a good
That
point.
probably
So
be
you want to do something like take more debt as part
from the
of
bank, as sponsored by the government for startups.
That's a
Could
good point.
Probably be
Actually,
a good idea.
Yeah. I think both of you sort of talked about incorporation of the company in terms of starting up and also financing needs to be met with, and also you talked about taxation. Talk about, once you're sort of 3 to 4 years old as an organization and you want to retain your key employees. Ultimately, all of you are tech companies, and more often than not, money goes with people, right? You're not building cement companies, steel companies out there. So what about ESOP taxation? What is your view there? Should we completely sort of do away with it? I think it's so penalizing for an employee to sort of pay tax on what you have earned, like hard-earned money. What is your view there, Danish?
Well, I think Mr. Narendra Modi recently submitted a suggestion on that. The way ESOP tax works today is that the moment you are given the shares, you tax for them. So before you even cash them, it's great if you can if you tax us when it's
penalizing an
cash.
employee.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's not even penalizing. A lot of employees say, don't give me ESOPs because I will have to give tax on it, and I don't know when I'll cash it. So it's better that you tax them when they're cashing it out rather than taxing them when they're just getting the ESOPs.
You were saying something, Sakshi?
No, again, like I think I agree with him that it needs to be at the time when the wealth is created, because the idea of the ESOP is wealth creation and long-term wealth creation for employees, which is why they're coming and working with startups at this stage, and some of them have brilliant jobs. They're still switching. And therefore, I think having it at a time when you realize value, when the liquidity is there, is much better than paying from the, right from the beginning, like you said.
So I think my last question is sort of we're getting towards the end of the conversation here. I think concluding thoughts on sort of 3 top requirements from the FM, saying that if I were FM, I'll do this thing to the startup. We're like 3 days ahead of the budget. So how does that look like for you guys? We can sort of begin with you, Shailesh.
So one of the things we could do is, as we've heard right now from some of us, there definitely needs to be some upgradation of systems. Some more efficient systems need to be built, wherein all these processes related to registration of taxes, registration of companies, and all those things is very streamlined. That will be a big boost for people wanting to start up. The other thing, as one of us suggested, is that we could have incubators where the infrastructure is not really a problem. Given a certain minimum credentials of people who are wanting to start up, if there is a solid business plan, there can be government-sponsored incubators where all these infrastructural things like broadband and computers and all those things are readily available. So that'll be another thing. So for example, some fresh out of the college wanting to start something up, it'll be very simple for them to get on the thing. So these are the 2 key things, and of course, in the overall simplification of things scheme, if there can be some simplification around GST. For example, companies like us, we face a lot of VAT-related issues. Yeah, I mean, before we are doing any sort of business or any profitability or anywhere close to that, there's a rather complex VAT-related, reconciliations and filing and all those things that need to be done. So that is a big deterrent. I mean, before we are paying anybody else, we are paying the accountant a huge money for doing all these things. So if there can be some simplification around VAT, around GST, I think that'll be another big thing in helping the startups.
Sakshi?
Top 3 things would be, 1, like I said, greater inclusiveness in decision making. Much greater involvement of the startup ecosystem with the bureaucracy, with the decision makers, to understand what's required. Secondly, I think the government is talking a lot about the smart cities, and personally as a brand, we believe that mobility can be a very important aspect of smart cities. So again, a lot to be done, considering how mobility solutions can help development of these smart cities. And thirdly, I think a lot of data integration, a lot of integration of one-stop solutions of where we can access a lot of data about users within India, whether it is how you pay your taxes, how you pay your how you enter into a state, where is your in our case, where is the driver, what is your driving history, all of those things. There has to be an inclusive system in which this data is available. And I think that's
Any recommendations for the side of women entrepreneurship?
On the side of women entrepreneurship, I think I believe that times are better. Times are much better for women in general to be able to become entrepreneurs. I think from the perspective of what industry they are picking up and stuff, I think people are becoming more agnostic. I'm in an industry that's dominated by essentially male entrepreneurs. Having said that, I think as women entrepreneurs, we need that extra push. Therefore, the right kind of skill development, right kind of incubation funds focused on women entrepreneurs. Yeah. There are some very interesting incubation funds that exist out of the US which are focused on women, and I think they've helped create excellent women entrepreneurs. So I'd love to see some of these.
True that. Danish, yeah.
Right, so 3 things that are top of my mind are, one is the service tax holiday. I think that's a big thing for all startups. Absolutely, at least for the first couple of years, service tax is a big burden on every cost that startups pay, whether it's marketing or sales or salaries. So I think that would be a huge help. That will probably save 30% of what we're spending, and so that would be a significant help. I think debt financing is another big thing. If banks could help us raise as much as we've raised from angels and VCs, given that they are willing to take a risk on us, if banks can take a similar risk, that could be a huge help. In terms of how much equity you dilute and how much you are able to raise against that. And I think the third thing that the government must do is create a very conducive environment for investors, whether it's capital tax, addressing that issue, or especially for Indian investors. I mean, why is it that 90% of the money coming into India is from foreign investors?
Still foreign.
Correct. I mean, why is it that Indian investors are not encouraged enough to be able to participate in those things? I think that is another thing that the government should look into. We have got enough resources here in India.
Domestic wealth created.
Absolutely. So another thing that the government could do is, for example, several countries have this secondary exchange, which is not a primary exchange where you list a product, but more for startups where their shares are.
Exchange for India.
Correct, where the shares are secondary tradable. So if somebody has, for example, an angel has money in my company, he can easily sell those shares on an exchange instead of waiting for the company to really exit or do IPO stuff. So those things could make life easier for investors, and that would ultimately make life a lot easier for startups.
Interesting. All interesting points for all of you. Yeah, Samit, we'll just wrap up with you then.
So I think foremost about creating a better ecosystem, like it can be form of incubators and accelerators that we discussed, or simplifying regulations, taxation, or registration, so that we do things faster. Secondly, it will be great. It would be of great help if this 10,000 crore fund, a bit of it is actually in the form of direct equity into startups. A lot of startups are
and not necessarily fund of funds.
Exactly, a lot of startups are not directly liked by VCs because VCs, they like a particular set of startups, right? So I know a lot of friends want to do social startups, not getting that much interest.
Okay.
So probably a portion of it should be, for directly invested into startups which help the economy in a social way. Right? That will be helpful.
Talking about social entrepreneurship, you said, boosting that
exactly.
aspect.
Actually, just to add to this, see, I think if there can be some emphasis on actual problem solving in the country, problems that people face day to day. For example, let's say a lot of congestion on roads. For example, let's say the overall environmental long-term fitness of the country. Certain other problems, day-to-day problems that people actually face. If there can be some active contribution and, so to say, a conscious thought process along that line, I think that'll go a long way in both nurturing the startup environment in the country as well as ensuring that there is overall, so to say, a better living condition for people in the country.
So I think there's a story to be built around startups and sustainability. That's what you guys are saying, right? Okay. I think the FM needs to sort of have its work chalked out. We have very smart entrepreneurs and a very sort of long list of recommendations. With this, we wrap up our first episode of Pre-Budget Expectation. See you next time. Thank you so much, and thank you for being great speakers. Thank you.